Hello and welcome to another video. So today I want to talk about the Facebook conversion API and how to set it up within client-side GTM, Google Tag Manager, and server-side GTM. And then also have consent states in place so you're tracking everything correctly. And I will also explain a little bit about how the environment works, client-side and server-side, so it all adds up in your mind. Okay, cool. Let's dive right into it. Okay, first of all, I want to show you what we want to achieve. We want to achieve the following. We want to have for example, a page view tag being sent Meta server via our GTM server and our browser, our website, right? And then we want these events to be deduplicated by the event ID. As you can see, this is ending with 211, and this one should be ending with 211 as well. And this is a different one again, it's 112. And this one is 112. And that's what we want to get our system or our Meta backend basically to look at in the end and then process the data properly and accordingly and accurately, of course, right? So how do we do it? So there are quite a few steps actually involved in achieving that, because we have to set up our GTM client-side environment, but we also have to set up our server-side environment to actually pass this information to Meta's server via the conversion API. So I've read up about that quite a bit. Also, some of the other YouTubers, they talk about it, but I feel like what's sometimes missing is a little bit more detail to actually really understand it. So that's why this video is for. And let's have a look at it. Okay. So first of all, we have to set up a Meta pixel, right? We will use the community template gallery for that. And to be honest, I've just seen people using the Facebook pixel from Facebook archive for that. And I will also use that same template for that. Okay. So we will search for it. That's Facebook, right? And it should be the Facebook pixel. Oops, Facebook pixel from this one here. Yeah. Okay. Maybe there's another one for Metapixel. I actually haven't checked. So this is basically the one that people use. Okay, we will choose this template. We will add it. We will need to enter our Facebook pixel ID, which we will of course find here. We will go to overview. It's actually right here, or you can also copy it from here and it will copy it to the clipboard automatically. So we will head back in. We will also, okay, in my case, you could either paste it like that, and that's the pixel ID, or you could create a built-in variable, right? I already created that. So if you want to build that yourself, you just go here, you go to constant. So you just look at constant, you add this variable here, you name it metapixel ID, save it, and that's it. Okay. I've done that already, so I'm not going to do that again, but I wanted to show you how to do it in case you don't know. Okay, we will leave that. Standard is page view, so you could choose, right, depending on what you want to do. This is very basic. This is like the page view tag, which we will look at. But of course, you can build upon that, right? You could add other ones like submit the application, subscribe, or whatever. Also e-commerce data if you wanted to like purchases or something, or add to carts, right? Okay. Furthermore, we will go into the advanced settings. Just check here. Yep, we don't need that yet. We will have to add an event ID later here as well for deduplication into this section. But for now, we will set up a required, as you can see here, for the metapixel. Let's just name that real quick, metapixel, right? As you can see down here, we don't have any built-in checks. So usually, so in my case, I'm using CookieBot, right, as a GDPR compliant banner tool, right? To ensuring that consent is being given by a user, and we just track a user once they actually gave their consent and not any earlier. Okay, so as you can see, there are no built-in checks here. What do I mean by that? Okay, let me show you afterwards. So we will have to set up our additional consent, and we will set it up for ad storage because Meta is a marketing platform, right? So ad storage makes sense. As a firing trigger here, we will set up cookie consent update, okay? Meaning that this should only fire if somebody actually gives consent, okay? So we will save that. And let me just show you real quickly what I meant with the built-in consent checks. So if you go into your GA config tag, for example, and if you go to advanced settings and you go to consent settings, you can see these built-in consent checks, which just showed up here automatically once I installed or used the Cookieboard CMP template. But this doesn't apply for the Meta Pixel. So to ensure that we are not actually tracking a user without their consent, I'm adding this add storage as a additional consent check. Okay, cool. So that's the first thing that we have to do. So we've set up the Meta Pixel, right? Okay. Now, actually, what we have to do is we have to head over to the server-side GTM. But before I do that, I want to explain one thing or two about how this whole thing works here. Like, how does actually the client-side GTM talk to the Google Tag Manager server-side? Okay, because I think that's often something that is a little bit tricky to understand. So first of all, we have the GA config tag set up here, right? The GA config tag is basically the global tag, the base tag that you actually always install or set up with Google Tag Manager. It basically houses information that is kind of like top level almost. It records page views automatically. It will also enable us to actually implement a transport URL, which we will need to actually connect the client-side GTM container, this section here, right? The client-side GTM with the server side, because if you think about it, our GTM container sitting on the browser, right, on the website, basically, a user enters a website, does things, and it will record all the information client side, right? But the servers up here, and the server doesn't know anything about the client yet, so we have to connect them, right? We have to send the information via a request URL. It's sending data, like the request URL will send data up to the server side, and then we can utilize the information up here, and then we can send it out to Meta conversion API, via the conversion API to the Meta server, or also to other platforms like Google Analytics, whatever, LinkedIn, whatever we want to set up to, right? But that's kind of like the process. So we need the GA config tag. It's kind of like the global tag. And then the GA event page view tag is basically the specific tag where we can record additional events, right? That's why also the name Google Analytics GA4 event. You would usually set up like purchase tags, parameters, add to cart parameters, whatever you want, subscribe parameters, whatever you want, right? You would usually do that in this tag. Also, the advantage is if you wouldn't have this one here, but you would still want to link the GA4 event to your server, you would need to go in here and always set up a transport URL for each of the events. If you set it up once here, it applies to all of your GA4 events. It kind of inherits what you have set. So it inherits the settings basically in the GA4 event tags, the settings that you set up here. Okay, so this is why this is more like a global scope, our tag, so to speak. Okay, hope that makes sense. So that's kind of like the connection, right? I'm not going to talk too much about cookie consent here because I actually have 2 other videos about setting up cookie consent mode or cookie consent. There's a part 1 and a part 2, which I actually explain exactly what that means, how you can check it, and so on. So just check out in my channel. Basically, go to my channel and just search for cookie consent, Google consent mode part 1 or something, and Google consent mode part 2, and you will find it. And there's quite good explanations for you to practically implement it. Okay, so this is now the first step, right? So we have set up the Meta Pixel, right? So what do we have to do now? We have set the firing trigger to cookie consent update. That's all good. And now what we will have to do is we will have to go over to the server side. So how does that work? So I said before that the GA config tag here that we've set up is like a global tag, right? So first of all, of course, we have to set up a transport URL, which we have been doing here. So it's just under the configuration parameter. You go here and you set up your transport URL. You will get this transport URL when you set up a account, for example, in Google Cloud Platform. I'm not going to go into detail on that. You have to Google it. It's pretty straightforward. you basically just set up a server container and link the server container to your Google Cloud platform, and it basically will generate this URL, and you will add it in here, and then you have the connection established, okay, to your server environment, which is basically this environment, right? So your server side GTM, okay? So you have to add that in. Then you have this connection here. Then as you can see here, there's a client already set up. So this is basically the client that claims the requests that come in from the client side. So once we fire this tag and the tag fires it over to the server, which it can do now because it has the transport URL, this client here, the GA4 client, will basically take these requests and basically show you the full scope. Basically, it's all the data that you send over will be housed in this GA4 client. But now, so we can actually use this client because now this client is just sitting there, right, in the server. But if we want to do something with this information, it's basically data, right? It's data that we have, but it's just sitting there now on the server side. We want to now use this data, and that's actually the reason why we have to set up a GA4 tag to actually claim the requests that come from the client GTM in our server-side environment. And then we can do whatever we want to do with it, basically, right? For example, we can set up the GA4 tag, which is now actually sending the information over to Google Analytics. If, for example, for page views, somebody enters the site, it goes to the client side, right, to the client GTM. The client GTM, the tag, the GA4 config tag, will take this information. It will now send it on via the transport URL to the GA4 tag in the server-side environment. And then, or basically it actually sends it first to the GA4 client here. We will then basically take it, right, by setting up the tag, and we will then say, okay, let's send on some of this information or all of the information to Google Analytics 4, okay? That's basically how it works. You can also see that in the setup quite easily. I've done it all pages GA4, and I've set up a trigger that fires on client name contains GA4. The client name, as mentioned, is this one here, is GA4. So we will basically pass or take on the requests that come in, okay? Long story short, yeah. Anyhow, that's important to know though, right? So you understand the connection between the GTM client side and the GTM server side. And now, as mentioned, we have the information in the server. We can now, for example, set up a metapixel, or we have to set it up because we now want to transfer the information further on to our Meta Ads API, right? Or via the Facebook conversion API to the Meta Ads server, basically. So we will go in here. We will set up a new tag from the template gallery. Loads takes a while usually. So let's have a look. We will search for Facebook or conversion API tag. So there's so many in there. You can use this one, Facebook CAPI. I used this one before, Step.io. This is different. That's the leads one. So these three ones, any one of those you can use. I'm going to go with the original one that was actually, I think, set up by Facebook itself. I will choose this template. Okay, so what do we need now? The pixel ID. Okay, I might have set it up now. I have not set that up yet. So I have to go back to my pixel. I have to copy the pixel ID. I will set a built-in variable here because it's just easier if we use it again. Okay, we'll set it up here. Call it metapixel ID. We will save that. So metapixel ID API access token. Okay, this is important, right? So we have to go to Events Manager. There are actually different ways how you can get this access token. You could go to Get Started, or usually I just go to the Settings page here. I scroll down, I search for access token maybe. And then you can see here, set up direct integration, generate an access token. As it says here, for a more customizable options, set up the conversion API and metapixel via direct integration. You'll need developer support for this process. Okay, generate access token. We will copy it. We will go back to our server-side environment. We will also set up a built-in variable for this. Oppa, what am I doing? Constant. Okay, this will be the meta access token. We will save it. Okay, then we need a test event code. I will add that in a bit later. I mean, we could potentially do it already, but I think we'll do it a little bit. I mean, I can add it actually. It doesn't hurt. Test event. So this is the new. This is the test code that I have to use. I will add that in here. Website is fine, right? And then extend. I usually always tick all of these, and also you look into the meta guidelines and the recommendations. They actually say that you should use both of them. You can read up on the developer Facebook conversion API integration setup. I'll put a link down in the description about that. Yeah, that's all good. And then the firing. So we will call it meta conversion API, right? And the firing trigger. Okay, yeah. So now the firing trigger, I don't have a proper firing trigger set up here. So I actually have to create that. So the issue here is we need to ensure that we have user consent before we actually send this metapixel information on to our server, to the meta server. Why is that important? If we would just, leave this like all pages trigger or something like that, we can't even use that in this case. But we need to have something where we have a check, because as you can see here in the server-side environment, we can't actually check any consent states, right? We can just do that on the client side. So what we have to do here is we have to set up a trigger that actually checks in the request URL if there's consent given. So because the request URL, if you think about it, the request URL is coming from the client, right? So the client side will send on the request URL to the server side. And in this request URL, the request URL is basically just a URL where data is being shared. It's called request URL. It's kind of confusing and a little bit misleading, I think, but it's basically just a data sending URL. So it's basically enriching the data. It will be sent from the client GTM to the server-side GTM. And within this URL, we can check for certain things. And we want to check if actually consent has been given on ad storage, for example, and then fire the meta conversion API over to our meta server. Okay, so that's very important. So we have to set that up. So we actually have to save this for now. We save the tag. We will have to build a variable for that. And this variable will be a ad storage consent check, basically. So we will go in here. First of all, before we can actually do that, we need to query some information from this request URL, which we can do with a query parameter. Okay. And the parameter name is GCS, so that stands for Google Consent State. I can show you that in a second, actually. So let's maybe go there real quickly now. Let's go to the website. Okay. So let me load that real quickly. So that's the website, right? And let's just check that without actually debugging, we should be able to see that. So when you go to the network tab here and go to the collect request here, or to the collect, you type collect, sorry, and you refresh the page. Let me just move this over here. You can see that nothing is being collected in this case, but that has to do because we are denying all the cookies. So we'll change the consent and we will allow all. And as you can see here now, the request came through from the GTM client side, as mentioned before, from our GTM container, right, client side. There's a request, and this request includes a request URL, that the URL, so that's basically a data URL, which I mentioned before. And within this URL, we can now extract certain variables, parameters, whatever we need, right? So we will look for the GCS, which is the Google consent state, yeah. And as you can see here, I'm also actually talking about it in a different video. We have the G111, meaning the second one stands for the ad storage and the third one for the analytics storage, which we will need to utilize. you will find out when you test this a lot how it changes, and then you find out. But yeah, that's a way how to look at it. So we will have to query this parameter. That's the reason why we actually go into here, this environment, and say query parameter, because this is a parameter, right, that we want to query. So we then say query parameter, and the name of the query parameter is PCS, right? Makes sense, because that's what the request URL gives us, okay? So we can query that, okay? And we will call it the Google content state, right? Google content state, PCS, right? Just you have to be clear on it, and we will save that, okay? So that's the first step. The next step that we have to do is we now actually have to build the pattern upon it, right? So how do we do that? So basically we will create a regex table, and this regex table will actually look at the certain pattern, and once the pattern matches, we say it's granted, okay? So in essence, we will go in here. We will look at a query at the regex table. Regex table. So regex table is basically looking at the query, right? And is basically looking for a pattern within the query, right? So we will set the default value as denied for this, okay? In general, it should be denied. This is actually not correct. Why is that in here? So that should be Google consent state. I will still have to change that, yeah. And then the pattern will be, if you look at, in our case, it will be, so this is actually a tip that I got from another guy, Leon Kotowek. You have to look at this channel. He's really good in GA, Google Tag Manager stuff. Check out his channel, Leon Kotowek. Good guy. So do it this way. So the pattern would be G11, and then the dot within regex means it could be any number, right? It could be a 0, a 1, a 2, a 5, a 9. We don't care, right? But we do care about the second number, which is the add storage, and we will say granted here, okay? And that's basically it. Then we will still need to, and I will call it add storage constant, okay? We will save this. Yep, that should be fine. Oh, okay. So now we will have to build a trigger upon that. Like we will need to have a trigger, right? When this state actually is coming true or is true. Like if it is granted, then we want to fire the trigger. Okay, so we will go to the trigger as mentioned. We will go to new. We will call this all pages with consent, right? And then we will go to the page view. We will say some page views, and as you can see, the variable is actually in here now. And when it is granted, this should fire the page view. So let's save that. Okay. So then, of course, we have to add this meta conversion API, or this new trigger that we created to the meta conversion API. So all pages with consent. Okay. And that should be doing it. We will save that. Okay. So I think, so let's now test this whole environment and see if it actually works. So we have set up, just to recap, the meta conversion API with all the metrics that we need, including the meta pixel ID, the meta access token. We have enabled these, and we've set up the firing trigger, right? That's the one thing. In the client-side GTM, we have set up the metapixel, and it will be firing once user consent has been given. So this metapixel, of course, will fire directly to the meta server, right? Because it's a browser-side pixel and it's on the client. And then, of course, the server-side pixel should be firing from the server-side environment into our meta ad server through the conversion API setup that we just did. Okay, so we got basically two lanes. We got the browser pixel, and we still have the browser pixel, and we also have the meta server, basically pixel being sent through the server, right? So let's test that. Let's go into our preview mode, and let's just see if it comes through or not. So we will preview both of them, right? We will have a look at that. Let's just load the page. Okay, let's see what happens here. Okay, this is actually, yeah, that's okay. So this is starting to load. Okay, as you can see here, actually there's some requests came through or some tags actually fired. So the cookie bot tag always fires, the GA config tag also fires. On initialization, check my other video on cookie consent mode, Google consent mode, sorry, where I'm talking about it. And as you can see, this GA4 event page view has not fired and the metapixel has not fired because we haven't given any consent. Let's look at the server-side environment, so server, right? And let's look what happened here. So that's good, right? No request has come through. Why is that? Oops. Why is that? Why is no request come through? Because we haven't actually consented to anything yet. So let's change the selection. Let's go to allow all. And now let's have another look here. That's good. What we can see here now is we can see the metapixel actually fired. The GA4 event page view fired. So there was an update, cookie consent update, as you can see, and these two events also fired. Before they haven't fired, right? Up to consent update, nothing happened. Right, the consent update actually happened then and updated it to granted, and then it fired, right? So up to this stage, there was denied. Consent update, I clicked over there, right? I consented, and then basically these data layer push actually occur, okay? Which is cool. So let's see what that means for our events manager pixel. So let's clear that activity here. So yeah, so I should have done that before probably. So let me do this again. Let's just go out of this again. This one as well. Okay, and let's do this again. So let's preview this. Let's preview this tag. Sorry, the GTM container. Okay, oops. What's happening? Yeah. Okay, so it's firing. Cool. So we have consent granted, as mentioned. We are consenting to all of that, which means all the tags should fire, which is awesome. That's what we want, right? And additionally here in the server-side environment, we also have a page view request come through. And the beautiful thing about this, as you can see, the GA4 tag fired, of course, right? Because it should fire. Because it has to fire, right? Because we're passing information on. And the meta conversion API also fired with these credentials, basically, right? The metapixel ID, all that we have set up before, it fired, which is really nice on the page view. And it says add storage consent contains granted, which we have set up as the firing trigger. As we have granted consent here, this makes sense and is consistent with our setup, correct? What else can we check here? Not much, actually. So we're in the page view. Yeah, we can maybe have a look at that as well. So as you can see here, we also have two outgoing requests. One is the one from or going to the meta ad server via the conversion API that we've set up, as you can see, via the meta conversion API. This now goes over to the meta server, and this one goes to the Google Analytics server as well. Okay, that's good. And this is basically the incoming request from the GTM client-side environment. Okay, and in this one we tapped, and then we've set up these steps, and then it goes out, right? Okay. So if we look at the events manager, and that's a beautiful thing, you can see already, actually also the events have populated. This is a little bit weird. Server side, do we have a event ID set up? Maybe I haven't removed that because of course I tested this before. Why is the event ID in there? Let me have a look. Okay, all good. So what I've done, because I tested it beforehand, I've actually kept the event ID in the client-side GA4 event page view tag, which basically has been sent on to the events manager. So as you can see here now, we are getting the page view custom event being sent here, and also the browser side event for page view as well into Meta, which is cool. But as you can see here, the event ID is not populated in here yet, because that's what we still have to set up our tags to do. So how do we do it? So it's quite interesting, because you would maybe imagine that we have to set up the event ID on the server side, right? Because that's where we also have the Facebook conversion API, but it's actually not the case. We actually will set up the event ID in Metapixel here, and we will also set it up in the GA4 event page view tag, basically because this tag is anyway sending on the information to the server-side environment, and then it will be passed on once we have consent, ad storage consent, it will be passed on into the Meta ad server through the Facebook conversion API. So it's a little bit counterintuitive maybe, because you would think like you have to set it up in Facebook conversion API, but that's not how it works. We have to receive the event ID first, and we have to basically tell the server-side environment that this is actually in fact the event ID, because the server doesn't have a connection to the browser, right? It's just not directly, at least. It's linked with a client-side GTM. So the client-side GTM needs to transport this information over before we can actually use it in the server-side GTM. So from that perspective, I guess it makes sense. So what will we do? We will set up the meta the event ID. So first of all, we actually have to create the variable. Sorry, we have to go into variables. We will go into new. I actually have set it up here already. Okay, that's okay. Because I tested it, I can actually delete it for now. So let's do this from scratch. We will go to new. We will go to click here. We will utilize the community template gallery again. And we will search for event ID. Doesn't really matter. There are quite a few templates out there. Unique. I use this one, or you could also use event ID. Put this guy here, or I use this one here from Stape. I like their service, so I'm using this. As you can see, unique event ID. This has to be unique, of course, right? With each page view, a new unique event ID will be sent. That's why it's called actually unique event ID. Call it. There's nothing else. As you can see, no configuration required. We will save this. So now we have our unique event ID, and we can now use it within the client-side tag manager. Let's just go to the Metapixel. Oops. Go to more settings. Yep. More settings. Oops. And then event ID here. We will also build a I got it in here anyway, event ID, yeah, that's all good. So we can utilize that now. We will save that. And then we will go into the GA4 event page view, event, or into the tag, right? And here we will also set up, we will click onto here, and also under, event parameters, we will add a new parameter, which in this case will be event ID, and you have to check with the Facebook documentation how you have to call that, and that's how you do it. So that's the right name. So actually Meta knows what we're talking about, event ID. That's it. Cool. Okay, that's okay. Let's save that. Okay, and now I think we have all set up. We didn't need to set up anything on the server-side environment as mentioned before, so we will just close these for now and start a entirely new request. So as you can see here at the moment, we don't have an event ID. We'll actually clear this as well. And let's see what happens now. So let's preview this again. Preview or connect a website, and then we will also preview the server-side environment. Okay, and let's see what happens. So we have consented, okay? We are consenting to everything, so we should see the tags fired. Okay, first of all, these tags fired. We could look into the Metapixel here. You can see here event ID has been actually firing as well, which is good, which we want, right? And then on the GA4 config tag, we can also, sorry, not the config tag, the page view tag. We should also be, yeah, we can see here an event ID, parameter event ID has been actually sent or actually has fired. Okay, that should be fine, right? Yep, so we consented on everything. So in essence, if we go over to our events manager, voila, what can we see? What a wonder, the event ID. And this should be the same for both. So ending with 3911 and ending with 3911, which means it will be deduplicated. Sometimes this report shows up like this. Sometimes it's like a line there in front, and it aggregates them, and then you use a drop down. It sometimes looks like that, sometimes like that. Don't worry. In the end, we have our event ID here. It makes all sense, and we are also cookie consent compliant, because we are actually using cookie consent updates on the page view, the metapixel, but also furthermore on the server-side environment, all pages with consent. So it's all accurate, it'll be working fine. And yeah, that's basically how you set this up. So it's quite a long video, sorry about that, but that basically gives you all ammunition to actually set it up yourself. And I hope that was valuable for you. I also hope that you could subscribe to my channel or comment or like the channel. And also for your knowing, I give advice on certain topics like Google Analytics, GTM, and ads related stuff, especially ads as well, on Google Ads, Meta Ads, TikTok, but also, the back end, how to set up things, and also a little bit on Canva, Looker Studio, and so on. So if you subscribe to my channel, I would give you a double thumbs up, and hope to see you again. Hope that was valuable, and keep watching, keep learning.